Well, Jesus had reached one of those times in his life when he was deeply disappointed and worn out. He had been speaking to the great religious men of Israel about matters profound, and all they wanted to talk about was whether you should wash your hands or not before you eat every time. Would it make you unclean? So here he was with all this knowledge of theology and history and all they wanted to talk about was washing their hands. It reminds me of the time in history when the communists were just about to take over Russia. And they were planning to. And at the same time, the Orthodox Church was meeting down the street, arguing about whether you were to wear your vestment on the left side over or the right side over. So while the nation was coming apart, they were worried about washing their hands, really. That's what it amounted to. So Jesus was leaving, and he started toward Tyre. It was a place he could rest. It was a Gentile area. None of these clergy would come in a Gentile area. They called them all dogs. They wouldn't be part of it. And his disciples needed to know that he was near death, and he was trying to steel them for that time. So here he goes into the Gentile land, away from hostility, but the people there already knew who he was and what he's done. It's awfully hard to raise people from the dead and heal people that no one else can heal and it not be heard. And it went across borders. He's coming. This man that we hear, and a few have even said probably, well, I was in a crowd and got to see one of those events. So here comes Jesus, and a woman with a sick daughter approaches him, asking for mercy. Lord, give me mercy. My daughter's sick. I need healing real bad. She had really very little hope. This thing shouldn't even be happening. A Jewish man would not speak to a Gentile, and he wouldn't even want to be in her country. And besides, she was a Roman citizen, and as a woman, she had very few rights. They're not used to speaking up and all. Her father had been her absolute power, and when she took a husband, when he gave her to a husband, the husband had absolute power over her. She was seldom educated, very seldom, and very seldom could they learn to write. So the men had to write the histories about them. It was a man's world. A child would live or die by what the father said. In the Roman world, when a child was born, they would take him or her and put them at their father's feet. And he would say, they live or they die. And if it was a girl, it was very often she dies, and they would take her down by the river or somewhere and expose her, and she would starve to death. And the mother had no say in it. Only the father decided life or death. You see, she had no right to vote. This was the kind of woman that was coming to Christ because her daughter was sick, and it was worth trying it. Now, I want you to notice a very strange thing. It said Jesus didn't say a word to her. This doesn't sound like Jesus. The woman comes, he's been touching people and healing them, and she says, my daughter's ill, heal her, and he doesn't say anything. I think I know why. When we were studying counseling in seminary, we had a very great man teaching us, Dr. Oates, and he said this. He said, you'll be counseling people and it'll all go silent. Nobody's saying anything. And as a preacher, you'll want to be sure somebody's got to be saying something. We can't just have silence. He said, but in counseling, the deepest thoughts often come during the time of silence. The people are thinking and they go on down beneath and come up with solutions and thoughts they haven't had. I think Jesus was doing that. When she threw that on him suddenly, he knew he was called to Israel first to preach. And he went deep thinking about, but she has needs, and I'm called to Israel, and she's not part of Israel. And right after this thought, while he was doing this, the apostles came and said, throw her out. All she's doing is nagging us. She's nagging us about her daughter. We want her out of here. She's a Gentile anyway. And they probably used the word, she's a Gentile dog, which they usually did. The hatred was so bad that if a Jewish person found a Gentile in birth, they would not help them because they didn't want to be responsible for another Gentile being alive. The hatred was that deep. Jesus was going through this. The apostles were yelling at him, get rid of her. She's annoying us. So this woman with little hope, though, she had love. And love was overcoming the sarcasm and the non-compassion of the disciples and Jesus' silence. And she comes to him again and says, Lord, have mercy on me. What do? Now what Jesus says, I've read all the commentaries on this, they don't know what to do with this. Here she is, no husband's there to help her. She's alone. She's asking him to help her. He's her last hope. And listen to what Jesus says to her. This is why you don't hear this preached on very much. It's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to their dogs. Jesus said that? That doesn't sound like the Jesus I know. Throw it to their dogs. Well, let me say two things first. He changed the term dog to puppy when he said that to her. That's right, and these were the little pets that hung around under the table, and when food dropped, they were on it. And of course, the children a lot of times threw feed under to them. This is what was happening. But these are troubling words. I think Jesus said it for his disciples because they were the ones that were calling her a Gentile dog. That was their attitude. Laurence Olivier and Orson Welles, the two greatest actors of that time, got together to talk about acting. And towards the end, when they had been talking about it, one said to the other, but we know that the acting is really in the eyes. That's the most important thing. You've experienced that. You've experienced when people are talking to you and suddenly their eyes grow narrow. Oh boy, that makes a difference. And I think he's right. In the tone of the voice and in the eyes, we see a lot. And they were watching him talk to this woman and use it puppy and not mad dog like they were using. I remember this as a kid. My name was Mackey, that came from McNeil, my middle name. And when my parents said, Mackey, come here, that was one thing. And when they said, Thomas McNeil Pinner, come here, it was basically the same words, but hearing it was different. Well, the way he spoke to her and the way he looked at her, she didn't seem to be insulted. And the disciples were learning a language, learning a real lesson. You see, Carl Rogers, a long time ago, was one of the ones we had to study. he started non-directive counseling. And he had this method of sort of repeating back to you what you were saying. And it sounds different when somebody says that. For instance, you would come in and you'd be telling him about your uncle. And you would just go on and on and on. And finally he would sort of summarize it and say, you hate your uncle, don't you? And they realize, that's what I've been saying. That's true. I do. And they would move on. Well, I think when they heard Christ saying this, repeating what they had been saying, with the exception of the puppies, they got a lesson. They really got a lesson. Love found a way. She answered him. By the way, this is the only time in all of Scripture that anybody ever came close to getting the best of Christ. Most of the people went home beaten because they'd ask him a question, he'd answered it right, and everybody knew it was right. So he said, is it right to give this food, the bread, to the puppies instead of the people? Well, she loved her daughter, and it wasn't over. That would have closed most people out. And she said to him, yes, but even the puppies get to eat the crumbs, and that's what I want. That's all I need. They can keep eating. The dogs eat while they're eating. I just want the crumbs. Oh my. Here it is. Jesus answered her, woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted, and the daughter was healed. I want to say a word about faith, because if we're not careful, and I don't think we as ministers have done a good job doing this, by the way, faith doesn't mean something like Alice in Wonderland. If I just close my eyes and hope enough, it happens. That's not what we're talking about. That's not faith. It's just wistful thinking. No, that isn't faith. Faith is based on something that you need to take a farther step. Well, I can give you an example. Faith opens the door to knowledge. I believe that I may know, St. Augustine said. In the Rockefeller, the great center in New York that he built for healing, the medical facility, a doctor got up and there was a new disease and nobody knew how to cure the thing. And he got up and said, we will work on this. And someone said, it can't be cured. He said, it can be cured and we will do it. Now that's faith. It wasn't proven yet, but he believed it could be done. She had heard words about him. She had probably talked to some people that even had heard him. And she had something to base this faith on, this great hope on, and she did, and she trusted him, and after she trusted him, she knew who he was. See, it was proven. So faith isn't just this willy-nilly, well, it is based on something, but it's a step beyond, and there's knowledge beyond it. I believe that I may know. I have a time, I've done a lot of work in philosophy and philosophy of religion, and so I really enjoy talking to people that say I have no belief at all. And here's what I usually hit. This is the way it goes. I'll go to visit them. It will get around where I'll say, well, how's your spiritual life? What's happening there? And I've had them just flat out say, I don't believe in anything I can't measure, weigh, color. I don't believe in anything that I can't do it. I'm scientific. And if it's going well and everybody's friendly, I usually say, well, that's a shame because you've just missed most of the important things in life. What do you mean by that? I said, well, let's see. We have justice, freedom, liberty, love. How much do they weigh? What color are they? You're missing out on something. And then I'll usually say, if it's really going well and they're in a good mood, I'll say, well then I imagine before you got married, since you couldn't know your husband completely, that you got a couple of detectives to follow him because you wanted facts. You wouldn't do faith. Well, then they say, no, they didn't do it all. We loved each other. We trust each other. We don't know everything that's ahead, but we have faith that it's going to work. That's it, you see. Faith opens the door to so many things you won't know unless you try. Okay? Now, so here we are today. This woman who has loved has stood up to Christ and done pretty well. He said that. Well, your faith is great. You're keeping on. And here we are, a group of people at another crossroads. It's always a chance for a change of life. It's change of being, a change of position with God. That's what faith is. And this is another crossroad. And we have to look at crossroads very carefully and follow them. Now, we do an interesting thing in this church. So a lot of churches don't do it. We give an invitation. And that invitation is to say, I've come to the place where I have faith in God and I really want to follow Him. I don't know all that's coming, but I have the faith that it will be good because I will be with Him. And we give you a chance. I mean, if He died publicly, it's not bad for you to make a decision publicly in front of everyone. And some of you are here that need a church home. This is a fine church. I'm going to miss it. Elnora's going to miss it because you're a loving people and you've loved us and you've loved one another. And if I lived in this neighborhood, this is where I'd go to church because of the quality of the people and the love. So we give you a chance. If you would like to join today, you're welcome to come. We'll meet you down here with joy and welcome you. So as we sing our hymn of invitation, it invites you to make a decision at the crossroads. And I'll meet you down front.